Hello all. Welcome to the fourth Godavari Parulekar Memorial Lecture, organized by Progressive Students Federation of TIS Mumbai. I'm Anaga. I'm a first year MA Social Work student of TISS Mumbai and a Secretariat member of PSF. As I already mentioned, this is our fourth GPML that is we are organizing. Before I go into the details of the program, I'll just explain the background of the lecture series that we are conducting. Many of you will be already be familiar with the name Godavari Parulekar, and many of you will not be that much familiar. Some of you may be hearing for the first time, and that is the primary reason why the PSF is organizing a lecture series as GPML. Talking about the Godavari Parulekar, it is a name that we should not forget when we learn about the women movement in India. Her contributions to the early women's movement in India is like beyond our imagination. So. One of the key events that happened in Maharashtra, which contributed to the women movement in India, was organized by Godavari Parulekar. When women were denied the right to learn and educate, she organized a mass literacy campaign in Maharashtra, which is first of its kind in India. Even when she was a student, she was part of the anti-British struggles happening in India. And not just women, she dedicated her entire life to contribute to the Varli Adivasi community. And it led to the Varli Adivasi revolt victory, which was achieved in the face of brutal police repression and gunfire. Later, she worked with the All India Kisan Sabha, and she was one of the earliest women leaders, All India national leaders of AIKS. Like AIKS, she led the All India Democratic Women Association (AIDWA) and a leadership role in CITU also. She was a revolutionary and staunch anti-imperialist who committed her life to advancing interest of Adivasis, peasants, and women. However, her contributions in women movement and Adivasi movement are not that much discussed in academic spaces, especially in India. Such a personality have to be commemorated in academic spaces, and that is the reason behind PSF organizing GPML for the past years. As I mentioned, the past three lecture sessions of GPML was successful, and we were able to bring a handful of best speakers to our campus. It was online also, some lectures. The first session was delivered by Professor Utsa Patnaik of JNU, New Delhi, and Professor Vibhuti Patel as the chair from Advanced Center for Women's Studies, TISS. The second session was on the topic Remembering Varli Movement, History as the Present During COVID Time, where Professor Archana Prasad, JNU, as the speaker, and Ajit Navel from AIKS as the special address. The last session happened, that is the third session, was on the topic Democracies in Revolution, Latin American Emancipatory Projects of the 21st Century. The speakers were Sonia Surbi Gupta and Comrade K. Neela from CITU for the special address. And here we are for the fourth episode of GPML. And the topic we selected here is the women's representation in legislature, which is a matter of discussion in recent times. We know that the bill renamed as Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam was introduced in the parliament by Union Law Minister to reserve the parliamentary seat, one-third of the seats to the women. The bill, which has been a topic of debate and discussion in Indian politics for many years, aims to reserve one-third of the seats in Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies for women. To speak about the nuances of this, we have the best speaker who have experiences of mobilizing women in the ground level. I would like to welcome Comrade Brinda Karat, who is a leading figure in the women movement currently in India, and a patron of AIDWA and former MP at Rajyasabha. For the women reservation at legislative bodies, she has been working and taking it to the legal side. So, welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
As the chair of the lecture, I welcome Preethi Sekhar, the current Joint Secretary of AIDWA, Maharashtra State. She's also been working for women's rights in Maharashtra for a long time. So, before handing over to the chair, I'll explain about the structure of the lecture. Following me, Comrade Preethi Sekhar will speak for 10 minutes and she will hand over the session to Brinda Karat, Comrade Brinda Karat, and the speaker will speak for almost 30 minutes and the platform will be open for questions. Audience can ask questions via the comment box. Yeah. So that's it. So once again, welcome. Handing over the session to Preethi Sekhar. Ma'am, you are not audible actually. Can you turn on your mic?
Sorry, I'm extremely sorry. Thank you very much, Anaka. Comrade Brinda Karat, and all dear friends who are here to attend this fourth Godavari Parulekar Memorial Lecture. I'm really grateful to Progressive Students Forum for inviting me to be part of this lecture, which I understand is the fourth one, and it is definitely it's a matter of pride for PSF also that they have been organizing Godavari, a memorial lecture in the name of Godavari Parulekar, a college in an academic premise regularly. And this is the fourth episode, as Anaga has pointed out. I am also excited that the main speaker of this memorial lecture is Comrade Brinda Karat. Like all other students who have joined this online lecture, I too am eager to hear her. That too, we are going to hear about women's reservation in legislature, whether it is a representation or rhetoric, from one of the pioneers of a pioneering leader who had struggled for women's reservation bill to be passed in the parliament for years. The, the 33% women's representation bill is perhaps the longest pending bill in our parliament. It was first introduced in the Lok Sabha on September 12, 1996 by the United Front government of Devagowda. Unfortunately, the bill failed to get the approval of the Lok Sabha and was referred to a joint parliamentary committee. I would like to give a small history of this long pending bill, the long pendency of the bill. In 1998, again the bill was presented, reintroduced in the parliament by the NDA government when Vajpayee was the prime minister. And as some of us might be knowing, there was very unruly protests. Hooliganism, in fact, took place inside the parliament with the document being seized from the speaker and it was torn into bits. There has been a continued and unprecedented parliamentary impasse over the passage of this bill, which demonstrates the overt and covert resistance to it from the patriarchal forces across the political spectrum, barring the left forces. Voices of protest have risen repeatedly from the women's movement. There has been huge struggles demanding that the 33% reservation for women should be passed, and not only by the women's movement but also by the other democratic forces, demanding that the women should be given their political space. When again the UPA government under Manmohan Singh introduced the bill in 2008 in the Rajyasabha, again it was met with very stiff opposition, and it had to be referred again to the parliamentary committee. The parliament, that was in 2009, the parliamentary committee submitted their report endorsing the bill as it is. There was a historic opportunity to pass the bill at that moment, but it was passed in Rajya Sabha. But due to the lack of political will of the ruling dispensation, the bill was not passed in the Lok Sabha. The double talk of opposition parties like the BJP, which pretended support but did not help in arriving at any solution, is what we saw in 2010 in the parliament. Now, in 2023, they have introduced the bill. They have passed the bill with a roaring majority in the parliament, 454 against 2 votes. The Rajya Sabha also, it was passed with 214 votes in favor on the next day itself. That is 27 years after it was first introduced in the parliament. The 33% bill for 33% representation of women was passed in the parliament. But to my mind, to the understanding of the women's movement who have been steering this agitation for the last 27 or more than 27 years, this is not a progressive step as claimed by the ruling dispensation, but is endorsing the patriarchal mindset once again. They have been leaving they have decided that this 33% bill will be actually introduced only in 2029, so that by that time there will be delimitation of many parliament seats, many other seats also, and then they will be introducing this bill in the parliament, so that they will be implementing this act so that no man will lose any seat. So this is not the progressive uh, political space which women's movement was always demanding. I would like to share one of our experience in Maharashtra. Many corporations in Maharashtra, even before 2021, were having two members, the urban municipalities, two members in one ward. So, who are the two members and why are the two members? Definitely, Maharashtra had introduced 50% reservation in 50% reservation for women in the local bodies. So, in each ward, there will be two members. One will be a man and the other will be a woman. This is the way in which Maharashtra decided to have 50% reservation in the urban sector. Before 2021, we have some experiences like this, and in 2021, the Maharashtra government passed this decision that urban local bodies except Mumbai, the biggest corporation, will have three members in a ward: one woman, one OBC, and one open category candidate. One can be the reserved category, so that there will be no injustice to anybody. Nobody will be impacted due to reservation. That is a finding of Maharashtra. The decision to implement reservation after delimitation, the present act in parliament, is what they say is to ensure that a quasi judicial body like delimitation commission can decide which seats to reserve. Actually, it is not which seats to reserve. It will be how many seats to reserve for women. This, to my mind, is not a justice to women, but it's sheer patriarchy endorsed again in our society. I would like to stop here. I'm not going to take more time. I would like to invite our dear comrade Brinda Karat to deliver the fourth Godavari Parulekar Memorial Lecture on the topic reservations in the women reservation in legislature, representation or rhetoric. Comrade Brinda, please start.
Thank you so much, Preethi. And you've really given a very explicit and excellent presentation of a brief history of the bill. And thank you for that. And you've raised some very important questions. I would begin by thanking the organizers for giving me the honor of participating in a lecture series dedicated to one of the most inspiring women leaders, Godavari Parulekar. And before I come to the theme of our discussion today, Preethi, I will crave your indulgence and your permission to just begin by saying how important it is to have a lecture series in the name of a woman like Godavari Parulekar, who broke so many barriers in her time. I don't know if viewers of this or participants in this discussion know about Godavari. I assume you do, but still, I think it's important to flag certain extremely significant contributions she made to progress, to development, and most important of all, to raise the voices of the most oppressed, the Adivasi, the worldly Adivasis of Maharashtra. Godavari's first barrier that she broke in a very patriarchal setup was when she joined the freedom struggle as a student, and in the protests that she participated in, she was arrested by the colonial regime when she was just 25. And her father, who was, he was involved, he was a moderate, considered himself a moderate in the movement. He was horrified with the thought that his daughter was in jail. And so when she came out of jail, he disowned her. He said, unless you accept my reading of the freedom struggle, you're no longer part of my family. So at the age of 25, this young woman who had completed her graduation from Ferguson College in Pune in economics and politics, who joined law and became the first woman law graduate in Maharashtra, was disowned by her father. So she crossed that barrier because she believed in the politics of struggle against the British. And she went to Bombay, she joined the Servants of India Society, she joined the more radical trend, she became involved in the trade union movement, she became involved in the Kisan movement, went to jail again and again. She led a huge textile workers' strike in Bombay in 1940, just 2 years after she had got married to an equally brilliant communist. Shamrao Parulekar. And then it was after that that this inspiring couple turned their energies to working among the rural poor, and particularly Godavari, who left everything, went to Thane, and started organizing the worldly tribes. And if you read her book, which was written in 1966 when she was in jail, again she was in jail, she went to jail numerous times. The kind of work that Godavari did and the way that she understood much before the whole theory of intersectionalism, she understood class struggle, she understood caste oppression, and she understood discrimination based on being a woman of gender. So Godavari was at the intersection of caste because Adivasis were considered untouchables. So she was in the intersection of that. And in the course of her organization and mobilization of Adivasis, she unraveled so many layers which were invisibilized. The way women, Adivasi women, were considered the property of feudal landlords. The way Adivasi women were automatically the servers of the feudal oppressors. And anybody who chose any of those young Adivasi women had the right to do so. And it was Godavari who was one of the first women in that area who listened to the voices of what the Adivasi women were saying. And she integrated the issues of women into the class struggle, into the Kisan struggle, into the fight against feudal oppression. And for that, she was a pioneer. I mean, she was a pioneer on many, many fronts and many, many fields. But specifically, she was a pioneer in being able to integrate these various aspects of oppression and exploitation. And of course, she spent the rest of her life. She joined the communists in 1938, and she spent the rest of her life until her death in the 1990s, holding a red flag, the symbol of struggle, the symbol of sacrifice. And she symbolized that. And so today, on the occasion of this 4th memorial lecture, I want to pay my deepest homage to her and to say you are so right in choosing Godavari and the struggles of Godavari to inspire young people in campuses today through these lectures in her memory. Godavari herself was never interested in much in parliamentary politics. She saw the importance of it. And she was the stalwart who pushed Adivasis into parliamentary politics. Shamrao, of course, was elected before independence as a legislature from the Indian Labour Party. And, he was a very, very important voice there. But Godavari, in her own life, was interested in the mobilization of people and to force the rulers to recognize the strength and the unity of the Adivasis and how they could make their own way into parliamentary politics. So in that sense, I'm not sure, because in my own work and in my own interactions, numerous interactions with Godavari Tai, I don't think she ever expressed much interest in the issue of herself, I mean, in parliamentary politics, but she was always extremely concerned about representation of the poorest sections and their voices in parliament. And I think it is her legacy today that even today, so many decades after her contribution, the red flag today flies high in the areas where Godavari had fought. And the CPM has an MLA there in exactly those areas where Godavari had lived and worked. And so I would not connect Godavari that much with the issue of women's reservation to that extent. Because during Godavari's time, and during the time of the freedom struggle, it was considered an insult. It was considered, I won't say use the word demeaning, but it was felt that we as women are equal partners in the struggle for freedom. So why would we ever think of quotas and reservation? We don't need them. We are there. We are fighters. And that was the atmosphere at the time of the freedom struggle. So within the Constitution, when the issue of reservation of SCs and STs came, women in the Constituent Assembly never really asked for reservations because they felt they had every right and they had every merit, if it was merit which decided, to find their own place in politics. But patriarchy bites. And what happened in the first Lok Sabha elections? I mean, you've heard about so many examples in world history where women are used in industry or women are used where men are away and then told, okay, go back home, your work is done. Well, something similar happened after our freedom struggle. The women pioneers of the freedom struggle found that when India became independent and when the ruling classes of India, representing the Indian bourgeoisie at the time, and of course the landlords, their ideologies had very little space for women. So whereas the Constitution, reflecting the values of the freedom struggle, guaranteed equality in the sense of banning and prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sex, in actual reality in life, there was a completely different reflection. And in the very first Lok Sabha, there were only 24 women members of parliament. Just 24. I mean, I think that was probably less than 5%. And that has been the case. So at the beginning, and for many decades, women themselves were not demanding reservation because in their mind, the burden of oppression of patriarchy would automatically disappear once India became independent. And of course, as we know, that never happens. No oppressive structure based on a material basis such as capitalism and the marriage of capitalism, feudal and semi-feudal relations in India will always promote and co-opt and merge patriarchal notions and practices into whatever so-called modernism they were taking forward according to the values of the Constitution. And if you look at you fast forward even to 1975, at the important seminal Status of Women's report, even there were differences among women because they still felt that there was a chance. Emergency blew away all those illusions. And the women's movement was re-energized in many, many ways. And the women's movement, I won't say movement, I would say movements, because there's no one homogeneous women's movement. There are many trends in women's movements. The goals, ostensibly, are to fight male supremacist cultures and practices and policies, but they come at it in different ways. And it was through very bitter experiences that it was found that structurally in India, the way patriarchy has merged with oppressive and exploitative systems, and the way it has been used, for example, in the labor market, to utilize the secondary status of women to exploit female labor, in spite of the Equal Wages Act that we have in India. So those realities were the basis for its reflection in politics. And as more and more money and as democratic processes started being totally subverted by corporate money, when money became such an important part of the parliamentary process in India, forget 2023, even in the late 70s, the 80s, and 90s, the role of big money in politics was becoming very, very clear. The power and the money involved in an electoral post or position in politics became more and more apparent. And as that changed, supremacy and male supremacy got that much more strengthened by money power. And the fact that power was so important, there was absolutely no question of sharing it with anyone, leave alone women. So the struggle that we fought for women's reservation came out of very bitter experience. But I want to say that the different approaches to women's reservation also are that much of a reality. For example, there was a section in the movement which believed in a kind of, how would I put it, like biological essentialism, that I am a woman and therefore biologically, by nature, being a mother, I would be more caring, more nurturing, more sensitive, and more aware, and therefore bringing me into parliament and bringing a woman into parliament would certainly change parliament by having these nurturing women, because by their very nature, women would be able to be more sensitive. I mean, it's a fact that women certainly would be more sensitive to violence against women or rape or issues like that. But this whole thing of biological essentialism, today in Hindutva's India, with Hindutva women being more aggressive than anybody else, the whole theory falls flat on its face. But even in those days, we had Thatcherism, we had Golda Meir and her aggression, her Zionist aggression. What we see in Palestine today is not an overnight phenomenon. And we have seen women all over the world being extremely aggressive, and more so in new liberal world, the aggression of right-wing politics and the way that they have co-opted women's movements in the worst possible sense, to give a space to their women leaders to approach women. So this theory that women are by nature better, we didn't buy into that theory. And certainly the movement, the left-oriented women's organization that I was working with at the time, the All India Democratic Women's Association, we did not share that approach at all. A second aspect was that we need women to represent women. So the kind of representational politics, which for example, many feminist women who call themselves feminists, I think the word feminist is both misunderstood and also overused, I think. But in any case, there was a stream of women who believed that it was important that women represent women because only women could represent women because they could experience it directly. So that kind of very basic and I would say mechanical representational politics is really not something that we shared because, as I said, I always believe, and I think experience shows, that what is much more important is the ideology, not so much biology. Ideology, not so much a kind of mechanical representation that because I'm a woman, I can represent a woman best. So that trend also, I think, it did have a space, but at least I didn't agree with it. And many of those I worked with didn't agree with it too. The third, and I think that is the point which was most important to us, that it was a question of democracy. And why should women be kept out? I mean, if we are fighting for women in the economic sphere, if we are fighting for equal rights in every single sphere, then why should politics be excluded from the basic fundamental democratic principle of equality? So by bringing equality in, because women as women are not homogeneous. There are Dalits, there are Adivasis, there are OBCs, there are Muslim women, there are working women, there are rich women, there are poor women, there are exploited women, there are exploiting women. So women are not homogeneous. But as a woman, if I am to be denied because I am a woman and because of the power of patriarchy in our capitalist system, as I have mentioned earlier, then certainly breaking that barrier would be challenging a status quo which believed that in politics, democracy could be perfectly implemented without the participation of women who are half of the population of this country. So, democracy demands the barrier against equality in politics based on a particular notion of women has to be broken. And in that struggle, we found, whereas other bourgeois parties were more concerned with power politics, there were two trends. One was a trend represented, I think, by right-wing, at that time, votaries who believed that bringing women into politics and into public life, this was in the 70s and 80s, when domestic violence also was a very, very important issue. And in that, I must say, the autonomous women's feminist movements played an extremely important role. And they certainly helped to push the movement forward. So at that time, domestic violence and what was happening in the home was a matter of great, great debate. And right-wing believers felt that bringing the family into it was doing grave injustice to Hindu sanskar and Hindutva, understanding of the ideal woman being the ideal wife, the ideal mother, preferably of sons, and so on. And therefore, that was one area of domestic violence. The fight to preserve the family as the ideal Hindutva unit got linked up to the issue of women in public life. And we have statements of RSS leaders at the time who said, this is going to ruin everything, because bringing women into public life is going to completely disrupt their main role as homemakers. They are goddesses at home, and keep them as goddesses at home. So that kind of understanding was very much a strong opposition to our linking up the issue of women's reservation with democracy. And of course, the other aspect which was used was caste. And I want to explain this a bit, because the women's organizations, when we made our representations to Parliament for demanding women's reservations, we never ever opposed caste reservation. SC and ST reservation was already very much part of the discussion. But what we opposed was the use of caste, and the use, particularly in the post-Mandal era, of using OBC women's status, a subordinate status of OBC women, to use that to say that no women's bill until you have reservation for OBC women. Now, it's very clear, if there's discrimination on the basis of caste, the discrimination will be there for OBC men too, because it's on the basis of caste. But certainly within the discrimination against OBC men, there will be a much higher discrimination against OBC women. So in the constitutional framework today, we have vertical reservations, that is, reservations for SCs, reservations for STs, because both SCs and STs, whether they are men or women, definitely are victims of historical burdens of unspeakable oppression and discrimination, which continues today for both men and women. Women obviously facing a much greater burden, and therefore within the 1/3 reservation for women, there will be and should be and must be reservation for SC women and ST women, both vertical and horizontal. So there's 1/3 reservation for women. Within that 1/3 reservation for women, there will be reservation for SC and ST women. It could not apply to OBC women, for the simple reason that OBC men had never, ever demanded reservation. So here was a peculiar paradox, that you have OBC men saying, no, we are fighting and we are the largest single caste group in the Lok Sabha, but our women need it. Of course women need it. Of course OBC women need it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And if there was to be 1/3 reservation for women, OBC women would definitely benefit, because all those seats which were reserved for women, OBC women would be getting tickets. So our position always has been never opposed to reservation for this or that oppressed caste. However, what we have always maintained is that vertical reservation for the caste is essential to pinpoint the caste discrimination they face, as there is OBC reservation in education, there is OBC reservation in jobs, and therefore, if required, and if the OBCs want it, they should raise a demand, which is a perfectly legitimate demand, if they believe so, for OBC reservation in politics. But that never happened. And what did happen was that, just as there were excuse after excuse from all sections, and mainly the strong, powerful lobbies, which were mainly elite lobbies of upper caste who were using every single opportunity to sabotage the bill, the OBC opposition came in as a very, very handy instrument and tool. So when the whole struggle started, and it was women's voices which came from the grassroots level because the first time in 1988, when the National Perspective Plan for Women was suggested by the Congress government at the time, I remember Margaret Alva was the minister at the time, they made a suggestion that there should be nominated women in the panchayats. And we had a big convention in which women of all sections were represented, and a wide range of, I think, maybe 60 or 70 women's organizations from every state across the country. And we came to a definite conclusion that we are totally against nomination. We do not want nomination at the local bodies. We want reservation. Because nomination means you are always at the mercy and subordinate to the powers that be who will nominate you. We said no nomination, we want election. And therefore, it was after 1988 when women's organizations rejected the first offer made by the government to nominate us to local bodies. And when we said, no, we are not going to become an instrument to subvert democratic processes, because that's what would have happened. You'd have had so many nominated seats, and the government in power would have the power to nominate you. And therefore, that's also a subversion of democracy. So right from the beginning, we have upheld democratic principles and a democratic spirit and approach. And after that was rejected, and there were big movements against it, then came the first reservation in the early 90s through a constitutional amendment, 73rd Constitutional Amendment, for 1/3 reservation in panchayat and in local bodies. And then, of course, we had to face for many years the charge of being proxies. Oh, women are proxies. What's the point of giving women seats? They are proxies. How many proxies of Adani do you have today in the Lok Sabha? How many proxies of corporates do you have in the Lok Sabha? How many proxies of the most corrupt contractors do you have? Proxy politics and capitalism. And yet, those women who for the first time had the opportunity to step out, it was not their fault. It's true that in the first years, in the initial years, it was exceedingly difficult for women who had been elected to step out of that highly patriarchal casteist framework. Imagine a Dalit woman in that area where there's no land reform, where class relations are so heavily weighed, whether it's a woman or a man, and a Dalit woman being told by an upper caste landlord, how dare you sit on a chair, go and sit on the ground. And she sits on the ground, so she's a proxy of what? Structural inequalities became the greatest impediment to women getting out of the proxy mold. Structural inequalities. But they did it. And I think one of the most inspiring examples, particularly in areas where the left movements have been strong, the role of local bodies and the role of women in local bodies has been one of the most inspiring, not just for India and Indian politics, but for the world at large. And so that really opened up the avenue for the fight. And Preethi has very nicely given all the landmarks to it, but I just want to add my own experience in 2010, when ultimately, after huge struggles, we managed to get the bill, because UPA was dependent on the left. And there was a huge mobilization in the first UPA government, which couldn't happen. But then in the second UPA government, I mean, I think it was in 2010, yeah, in March 2010, where I think it was just at the cusp of it, of the changes, that we brought the women's reservation bill. And it was the behind stage negotiations which went on were quite amazing. And there were so many ups and downs. And in that, the chairperson, Professor Hamid Ansari, played the most, critical role, because he just took a strong stand. The political will which Preethi was talking about, it was on display through him at that time. But there were many people, including within the Congress at the time, top leaders who were encouraging others to, make a noise. And a guy sitting just behind me, he just got up, smashed a glass, bled all over the Rajyasabha table, leapt up. I mean, I thought he was going to fall on my head. And then they all tried to rush to the chair and to tear up the bill and to surround the chair. But in spite of all the shenanigans, ultimately the bill was passed. There's 5-minute walk between the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha. It's taken how many years from 2010 for it to finally reach the Lok Sabha. And the shame of it is, the Modi government promised it would happen in 2014. Now, at the end of the 2 terms, they bring a bill which is such a, I don't want to use the word fraud, but it is such a betrayal of the whole movement for women's reservation, because it links it to the census, it links it to the Delimitation Commission, which is totally not required. In the 2010 bill, it was through lottery. Now they say if we did it through lottery, you would say, why you're getting this seat reserved or that seat. You can have an impartial team to pick out the seats, as is done in the panchayat and local bodies, which is rotational. So which seat becomes reserved is nothing to do with the population of that constituency, whether it's more male or more female. It's nothing to do with anything except 1/3 seats, 180 seats have to be reserved. How do you do it? That bill had said, do it by lottery. Every 3rd seat, from the first seat picked out of the lottery, every 3rd seat will be a women's seat. And it'll rotate every 5 years. That was the bill. The government changed it. And why did it change it? Because it does not fundamentally want 180 women in the Lok Sabha. So they have sabotaged it. It's not coming for another 10 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? So this is a betrayal of the women of India. It's a betrayal of the movement. It's a blow against democracy by a government which does not believe in democracy, by a government which is so deeply patriarchal. And that's the result we have today. So we fought the battle. You can say we won the battle in the sense that nobody can deny the importance of women's reservation. But when we are actually going to get the benefits of that fight, it's still a long way to go. And being a participant in that movement has really taught me a lot, because all through these years, we have met the most remarkable women who broke so many barriers to make a difference to the lives of people in their villages and their local bodies. They learned so much, and they gave so much, and they took the movement so much more forward. So I salute those women. And when I hear political parties saying, oh, this leader and that leader, and we thank so-and-so and we thank so-and-so, it's such a load of nonsense. It's women, women's struggles, women's movements, and most importantly, women who fought in the local bodies, who won the elections, and who showed that women are not proxies when they are given even the slightest chance. And they fight structural inequality and discrimination. And I think it's an occasion to salute them, even while we pledge to continue to fight for better representation for women in Indian politics. Right now, we have 14% in the Lok Sabha, less than 8% on an average in state assemblies. We are among one of the lowest in the world. The lowest certainly as far as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, which is 1/3 reservations. I guess we can be happy that we're slightly ahead of Sri Lanka, if that's what you consider important. But on the whole, our governments have done very badly. And although India is an inspiring example for the rest of the world as far as panchayats are concerned, we are dismal at the higher level, because at the higher level is where patriarchy, caste, and class reign supreme. So fight it and fight the battle, and I'm sure because of your strength and struggle, we will ensure a better representation in the future. I thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you about a subject which is quite close to my heart.
Thank you very much, Comrade Brinda. That was outstanding lecture, very superb one, which has covered, I think, all aspects regarding the women's reservation bill and the struggle for the women's reservation, for the space in the political, I mean, for a role in the political space, the women's struggle for the role in the political space. It was an excellent presentation where I don't think there is any aspect which has not been touched up in this particular lecture. Ram, Anakha or any other person, do we have any questions? I'm not seeing any question being scored. Yeah. Comrade, I'm reading out a question. One Sri Lakshmi is asking, one of the changes in the new bill is that constituency reservation change will be after delimitation and not on an election basis. What do you think are the pros and cons of this?
Well, I think one of the reasons which the government is trying to give is that delimitation is going to mean, a change of SC and ST seats where there are reservations now. So that may make a difference. But quite frankly, as far as women's reservations are concerned, it is not at all related, not as I explained, it is not at all related to delimitation. Whatever the constituencies are today, do a lottery and every third seat is a woman's seat. And within that, you already have SC, ST reserved seats. Within those seats and within the women's seats, you must ensure SC, ST reservation. So it doesn't need rocket science to get that done. And it's certainly not linked to delimitation at all. So there are no pros for it. There are only cons. And therefore, I entirely oppose it. It makes no sense at all.
Aryama Ghosh asks, the implementation of the bill is tied to the census and related delimitation exercise that has been continually postponed by the NDA government. I think it will be postponed. How do we read the passage of this bill then?
I mean, that's true that, with all this, why are we saying that the passage of the bill is good? Because at the end of the day, you do have a law now for reservation for women. the effect of delimitation and the effect of linking it to the census, in fact, as I said, is meaningless, except as an instrument to delay the implementation of the bill. But I guess you can say it's better to have a law than to have no law at all. So it's only from that extent that I think people voted for the bill.
Arjun asks, the BJP has been driven by Hindutva patriarchy, evident in policies like the UCC and the age of marriage. How do we make sense of their progressive stance on this bill then?
I don't think there's anything progressive about it, frankly. This is the impact of women's struggles and movements in which the BJP, which was initially dead opposed to the bill and tried to sabotage it at every opportunity, were forced to do it, and they included it in their election manifesto. Now, in the first 5 years, they didn't implement it. Now they're going into elections again in 2024. And the first question women are going to ask is, where's our bill? Therefore, to avoid that and to hit two targets with one arrow, what they have done is they've brought the bill, but have ensured that their own political bahubalis are not going to be affected by the bill at all. So they avoid the criticism of not bringing the bill, and yet they bring a legislation and a law which is not going to be implemented, at least for the next decade.
Rijin Narayan, it is baffling to see the bill's implementation timeline. It looks like a measure taken in context of the 2024 election, since none of the steps mentioned for the implementation of the bill are no steps are mentioned are in
No,
immediate.
I agree with
One more
Rich.
sentence, comrade. One more sentence. How do you think that the public and we as students can build pressure to accelerate the implementation of the bill?
Well, I agree with Rajan entirely that it is really baffling, and it's undoubtedly linked to the 2024 elections. I think it's not so much right now. I think it's not so much a struggle for the implementation of the bill, which legally is now linked to delimitation and the census. But I think right now students across campuses should really expose the government and its hypocrisy in trying to avoid being criticized and using the bill as an instrument to take forward patriarchy in politics for the next 10 years. I think the job of students today would be to get all the details about the bill and to take the government on in its hypocritical stance as far as women's reservation is concerned.
DJ Rock. The
Nice
general
name.
nice name. The general left sentiment has always been to avoid any kind of identity based politics. How is it that the progressive stance here stands affirmatively for the bill?
I think there's a misunderstanding here as far as identity politics is concerned. In the world, there is identity politics. What is working class identity? When you talk about the working class and the identity of the working class, it is a form of identity politics. When you talk about specific oppressions of Dalits and tribals, it is identity politics. When you say that women are discriminated and require affirmative action, it is identity. So you don't deny identity. It's not the identity which is to be denied. It is narrow politics. When we talk about identity politics, we talk about identity politics as a stream in political discourse, strategy, and tactics, which takes out a particular identity from its socio-economic context. And by wrenching out identity, as something completely separate from the socio-economic material conditions which result in the formation of a particular identity, you isolate that and then you strategize to use that identity for division of people instead of using that identity to strengthen solidarities. So it's the left has never been opposed to the understanding of what identity formation is about. But certainly we oppose a narrow approach to identity which wrenches it out from its socio-economic context and therefore isolates a particular identity and fragments democratic and progressive unity against a common enemy.
Siddharth, there is considerable debate on the bill in terms of reservations for women from OBC and minority communities, with some politicians going as far as asking that the bill will only benefit upper class.
Well, I mean, it's very true that
I
in
think
today's.
there is some more remaining. Upper class women. Is the bill an incomplete effort to ensure women's representation in politics?
There's no doubt that in Indian politics today, upper class, upper caste, and rich people have almost a monopoly in politics. There's absolutely no doubt about it. So, why should we think that women are superwomen who will ensure on their own a difference in that correlation of class and social forces? Undoubtedly, politics today is completely and utterly dominated by those who are rich, an upper caste, and elite. However, this also includes sections of those who have benefited from capitalism and the differentiation which has come within castes also. Therefore, to say that because I'm an OBC, I necessarily belong to an exploited class may not be entirely true. But yes, in general, there is absolutely no doubt about it that unless we have a higher representation of workers and peasants who mainly belong to the oppressed caste, we will not see democracy in politics. And I think the Women's Reservation Bill reflects that inequality in Indian politics.
Hello, comrades. I hope I'm audible. So, considering the time, we are not taking any more questions, and we are about to concluding the session. And if any of you want to add any concluding remarks, we can go ahead with that, and by that we'll be ending. Comrade Brinda.
Comrade Brinda, would you like to go for any concluding remarks?
No, I wouldn't, except to thank you again. I think, Preethi, you should make the concluding remarks.
No, I would say I have just already spoken. There is no need of another concluding remarks after this question answer session also. She has emphatically discussed all aspects about women's reservation bill, the struggle behind it, the struggle, the matter put up by the feminist movement also. That part was also taken care of in her lecture. So I don't think there is any need of any concluding remarks in this. One thing which she has told, that in the coming years we would come to know how the BJP government, the next government which is coming up, we all hope that it won't be another government from the Modi family. I mean, we do hope that it is something else, with some light. We will have some light in 2024 in our lives. So we do not know what is in store for us as far as this particular bill is concerned. Still, it is not clear. So there a lot of struggle big movement perhaps will be required, and that movement should not be confined to women only. The movement may not be confined to by the women only, driven by the women only. The movement can definitely have the strength of the student movement also along with this. That is, I think, what she has told now as during the question and answer session. So we do expect that with the whatever little anyway an act has come up, so let us try to better the result of that implementation. We will definitely try. The movement is there. We are vigilant, and we will be leading immensely. We will be leading a struggle so that the women's reservation will be implemented in a much positive way than how it has turned out to be now in front of us. A very as she herself has told in some speech, an eyewash. It's an eyewash, but we will definitely come out of this, and will definitely have a better implementation of this act. That is what we hope. And I think we can conclude today's program with the remarks from the the person who is giving the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, comrade. So I would like to give the vote of thanks, and I would officially concluding the 4th episode of Godavari Parulekar Memorial Lecture, and thanking everyone for joining the session and listened throughout and participating, and thanking very much for the speaker and chair for giving such insightful, speech as well as the remarks. I hope the people who are like people have already starting giving feedback that this was very insightful in personal messages, which actually this is the first time which before ending the lecture people have been giving feedback. So I hope this was that effective. And I would like to especially talk about that when we were discussing about the having a lecture and having on this topic, we had no doubt that whom we should invite, uh, who can talk on this topic very best. That is our speaker only, the Brinda Karat. And when we have approached, she has agreed that instant itself. And uh, similar with our comrade Preethi Sekhar also, we have approached at very last moment due to some other issues, but without any other concerns, she has agreed that instant, and which I wanted to share with our audience. And this will be available in YouTube, our YouTube channel, the recording of the session. So whoever wants to, if any of your friends, this is to the listeners, any of your friends or other classmates or any other people who would like to listen to this because of some other issues they couldn't join, you can convey about that this will be available on YouTube. And I hope this would be also an archive of this, women, the ongoing. We know that there are different debates are happening around this women reservation in legislature. So this would be a that way also a repository. So once again, I'm thanking everyone, and we'll be having more sessions in soon. So I would like to request all of you to keep connecting us through our social media, and please give us feedback to improve for the lecture, which we might have done anything. So yeah, once again, thank you everyone. You will be ending. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
time.
Preethi.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Great.